You know, the founding fathers of the United States, they created a constitution that provided its citizens with such benefits that this nation very quickly became the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And yet the tendency nowadays is that we've lost the vision of what they were about. What were their concerns, their objectives, their ideals? What did they do exactly? And I'm going to provide us with a study of a few of our founding fathers so that we can become better oriented. As Americans, we need to have this as a part of our heritage, the continuance of our heritage. And these principles that they utilized, they're universal principles. That is to say, they are ideals that all peoples everywhere have. These concepts are applicable to everybody. And I would like to begin our series of this study of the Founding Fathers with Thomas Jefferson because he was the principal writer of the Constitution of the United States. We can see here in the slide, he was the author of the Declaration of American Independence, which then became transformed into the Constitution of the U.S. He is author of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedoms, which also became a part of the Constitution, and he was the third president of the United States. And at this time, when this Constitution was ratified in 1788, when they launched it to the public, all of the authors, the signatures of this Constitution there in Philadelphia, they left town. They put this out to the public and they left. Why? Because this was high treason against the Crown of England, which was punishable by death. So they didn't know how this was going to come down. And at that time, just a little bit before this time, most of the colonists, they were in favor of remaining linked to England. But because of the work of Thomas Paine, this idea began to change. We can study Thomas Paine as well in the future. And so in recent years, I've seen people criticizing Thomas Jefferson because he was guilty of having slaves. And yet he fought in order to abolish slavery. In fact, originally in the Constitution of the United States, this was put there that slavery would be illegal. But the other representatives, signatures of the Constitution, they decided to take this out because they were afraid that because of this one point, this one very polemic point, the whole Constitution would be rejected. But they left there that all men are created equal, so that the question of slavery would be dealt with afterwards. And in fact, it was with the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. And nowadays, we have a highly immoral financial system that is going on in the United States and in the world. The question of usury, very high interest rates on loans given by these international bankers. It's been highly immoral throughout the ages because it's very obvious that usury enslaves your fellow man. It enslaves individuals, it enslaves companies that are paying back on these loans for the rest of your life. And in fact, they enslave entire nations. So in the past, in Jefferson's time, one race was enslaved. Nowadays, everyone is enslaved by this highly immoral financial system, which most of us participate in this. But I don't see anybody pushing back on the use of slavery by these international bankers. At least Jefferson in his day, he knew that slavery was wrong. He fought to abolish it. I don't see anybody fighting to abolish usury, this highly immoral tactics that these bankers use to enslave us all. We provide them with our own wealth, and they sit back doing nothing for nobody and receiving all of the money. What is this? And there's no pushback. Christ himself said, before taking out the speck in your brother's eye, take a look at the log that's in your own eye. Or some of us would say, the 2x4 that's in your own eye. Take that out before accusing your brother who has a speck in his eye. So let's see a few of the principal points of what Thomas Jefferson was about. And I've taken this study from the internationally known psychoanalyst, social scientist Norberto Cappi, who is also a philosopher, theologian, independent physicist. He did this scholastic study of the founding fathers of the United States because we need to know better what they were about. So looking at number one, nowadays this seems obvious to us that all men have the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In Jefferson's time, you didn't have the right to life. If the king decided that you should be dead, you were dead. Nobody had liberty. Imagine the pursuit of happiness. This was non-existent. It was just an idea, an ideal that was growing and was not implemented anywhere. But the founding fathers, they decided that they had enough of despotism. They wanted to create a system of self-government. And this was what they were implementing. Look at number two. The worst thing that exists is the self-seeking egoism of monarchs, clergymen, and nobles. These were the powerful people of his time. Once upon a time, the church was the power. And then gradually it became also the church and the nobles, the kings, and then the monarchs. Afterwards, governments. Nowadays, it's the economically powerful people, the worst type of power that we've seen throughout history. And what is Jefferson saying here? That this is the worst type of thing that exists. That these people, they're self-seeking. They're there just for their own benefit and not to represent or help the people in general. It's this question of the people serving those who are in power instead of those who are in power serving the people. Jefferson said this is the worst thing that exists. There's nothing worse than this. It's a very interesting idea because this is despotism. Let's look at number three. Mistakes are preferable to inaction because the indifference of a people is what kills a nation. He's saying here that we really try to help our fellow man, but we make mistakes along the way. And this is preferable to inaction. Martin Luther King said the thing that perturbed him the most were people who were indifferent, indifferent to social situations, injustices that need to be treated. But there are people who just turn their backs and they're completely indifferent to what's going on. It's the same kind of idea. It's the same type of idea that Jefferson has, that this indifference is very harmful to a nation. Let's look at number four. This is really interesting for us to notice nowadays, that schools and the public media, they must be free. That is, not controlled by any interest other than their proposed function, in order to avoid the corruption and decadence of a nation. The public media, they are our social consciousness. We are running our daily lives, our professions, our families, helping our communities. But to know what's going on in other places of the nation or the world, this social consciousness, it comes from the media. And if the media has been bought up by the economically powerful, nowadays the corporate media, or the mainstream media, as we say, it has become a public relations department for those who own the media. That is to say, these international bankers, the economically powerful. And so we don't know what is going on really. It's very difficult to know what's happening because the social media is not free to do its job. And what is really uncanny here with Jefferson, he says that when the media is not free, then the nation enters into corruption and decadence. How did he perceive that when the public media is not functioning correctly? Corruption proliferates and the nation enters into decadence. This is what's happening nowadays. We as an American nation, we have to admit we are in a state of decadence because our public media, the mainstream media, is not doing its job. Because the corporate media, the mainstream media, I'm not talking about independent media who try to bring us the truth, but the mainstream media, they have been bought out. You know, the most corrupt institution in the United States is the corporate media. There's no institution that is more corrupt than this. And this is causing a decadence to our nation. This is according to Thomas Jefferson, okay? He's a founding father of our nation. And looking at the observation, if the United States achieves freedom, then so would the rest of the world. Do you know where the Statue of Liberty comes from? There in New York? It was a gift from France. You know, in France, and on many of the buildings there, you see liberté, égalité, fraternité. You know, liberty, equality, and fraternity, or brotherhood. This was the crying call of the Illuminism, the enlightenment of this age. And so they were saying to the founding fathers, if you can achieve this freedom, then so can we. If you can do this there in a new nation based on these ideas, based in this philosophy, then the rest of the world can do the same. That's why they sent to us later as a gift this wonderful Statue of Liberty. So how can we cherish and uphold the Constitution of the United States that gives us such benefits as a nation and the ideals and the objectives of our founding fathers if we don't even know what they were about? So in my attempt to be helpful, each week I'll bring up the main points of another founding father so that we know who we are as a people, where we are coming from, because this is our psychogenetic inheritance. I'm Gilbert Gambucci, and this is Living Eternity Now. See you later.